Hi, welcome to the Suburban Garage Workshop. Today, we're going to take this circulator fan, this pack of filters, some hardware, and this sheet of 3/4 inch plywood, and we're going to build a silly mounted air filter. So let's get to it. So the first thing I need to do is rearrange the garage a little bit to get some tools out of the way. So here I'm actually pulling my Packard out and then pulling it back in and kind of move it over, and that gives me clearance to get some of these other tools out of the way. Here I'm moving my miter station, I'm going to move my dust vacuum out of the way, and then I'm going to go over there and pick up some tools that fell down. And now I'm going to move my my primary workbench. You can see there it's got a fold-up router table there at the end. I'll talk about that in another video. Lots of stuff I got to shift around. Usually I work out of that space there in the back, that 10 by 10, but when I'm dealing with full sheets of plywood, I like to get things clear. Here I'm covering up the car, keep sawdust off it, getting electrical in place, and we should be ready to go. So this is a sheet of 3/4 inch sanded plywood that I got at Home Depot. This sheet won't fit in my car, so I had the store break this down. So as you can see, I had to make two cuts. They cut off this bottom piece at about 28 inches, and then I had them cut the sheet the other way at 28 inches. The piece I need for my top and bottom of the air filter is about 27.5, and you'll find all these in the dimensions. I always have them cut it oversized so I can trim it to final size when I get it home. One, in case they got the cut slightly off. Two, if they're using the world's dullest blade in their panel saw, and it has a lot of tear out. These cuts are pretty smooth. Actually surprised they must have put a new blade in their panel saw, but I'm going to trim these here. But this is just the breakdown that allows me to get these in the car easy. Normally I'd run these panels through my table saw, but my table saw can only cut about 24 inches to the fence. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use one of these Craig AccuCut systems. My wife bought me this track for Christmas, and this is pretty much the first time I get to use it. It actually works pretty well. I got my DeWalt cordless saw on there, and it works pretty well. It's not a true track saw because the dust collection is non-existent, as you can see here. Here I'm take the top piece and I'm going to lay it on the next piece and use that just to get an exact measurement and go ahead and cut the bottom piece. So now I've got a top and bottom. I got to trim one more piece because that piece was a little long. And here I'm cutting the sides. The sides are about 12 by 27.5, and I need 4 of those, so I'm going to cut 4 of those out. And you'll see that roller is a Harbor Freight roller off to the side there. That works really well for handling kind of long sheets and giving you the added support. A couple of these pieces were a little long, so I'm just basically going to run those through my miter station and kind of nip off that 1/2 inch because they were cut at 28. I need them at 27.5. So go ahead and cut a couple of those off, and we're ready to go. Okay, so what we have here is our basic components. We've got our 4 sides, which are 12 by 27.5, and our top and bottom, which are both 27 by 27.5. We have a Lasco 20-inch high-volume air circulator, and we have some air filters. These are MERV 13 rated, and they're 12 inches by 24 inches. And here I'm going to go ahead and mark the center of the bottom board. So basically the board that's going to have the fan in it. And this is so I can use it for my circle cutting jig. So what I've done here is taken the shroud off the fan. And I'm going to go ahead and go around and make sure this fan shroud is close in the middle of that board as possible. So I'm using a square just to check the measurements on all 4 sides. And what I need to do is basically mark and get the outside diameter of this shroud. What I'm interested in is basically I have to do this to be able to get the inner measurement. And what the inner measurement I'm worried about is the inner diameter of where that little black lip is, because that black lip is what's going to actually set in the hole that we're going to cut. So I need to get the outer measurement, measure the width of that actual lip, and then I know where to set my circle cutting jig that we're going to do here in the next step. I'm using a Miles Craft hole cutting jig, and it uses this little center pivot to be able to pivot the arm on. So here I'm actually basically screwing that center pivot down into the middle of the board. And with the circle cutting jig in place, and I basically have set the radius of this circle to about 11 inches or somewhere a little less than that. So basically I've come in about 1/4 inches from the edge. And now I'm going to basically get the router drop down and start cutting the circle. Here I'm only going around about 1/4 inch at a time. That way I'm not trying to bite off too much material at one time and bog the bit down. So here I've gone down and vacuumed between each cut, and I've just gone around and around. Perfect circle. Lines up perfectly. Now it's time to start working on the sides. So what we're doing here is we're going to bring over a piece of the side. There's 4 of these, so we need to make 4 identical ones. And what I'm going to use is a 1-inch thick ruler to be able to get my spacing 1 inch from the edge. These cuts are kind of critical because these are the parts where the sides kind of interlock into one another with the slots. So in this case, what I'm doing is basically just scoring a line, you know, down the side, basically 1 inch away from the edge, but at least more than halfway. I'm going to do all these cuts on that one side. Because I want to feed these through the bandsaw. So I'm going to make all my marks on one side. So when I flip the board over, I can feed them all through the bandsaw on the same side using the same fence setup. My bandsaw is a 10-inch bandsaw, so I don't have a lot of throat clearance. So all of these boards have to be on the short side that I'm feeding through. Now what I'm done here is I've marked down 6 inches and I've used a square to basically mark the line over. And now what I'm going to do is use actually a piece of offcut from the actual material to mark the inner line. This is 3/4 inch plywood, but as we all know, 3/4 inch plywood isn't really 3/4 inch half the time. So I'm actually using a piece of cutoff to get that exact measurement. So here you go, I've got the one slot measured, and now I'm going to flip the board over and make the exact same mark, but on the other side. And this is to allow me to feed it through the bandsaw correctly and be up against a fence in the bandsaw. So let's go ahead and rinse and repeat for the other sides. Okay, so what I've done here is now we've moved over to our bandsaw. This is a little 10-inch Rikon bandsaw. This is over my shop area. I just kind of slide this out. And what I'm doing is I'm using a fence. I've got that fence set to 1 inch from the blade, and I'm going to go through and just cut the outer line. I don't want to reset the fence between every board, so I'm going to go through and cut basically all the outer cuts first on all the boards, and then I'll readjust the fence, and then we'll cut that inner line. So here I'm cutting it down, and I'm going just down to that 6-inch mark, maybe just a hair past, just to give me some clearance. Turn the saw off, pull it out, and then what we're going to do is we're going to flip that board over to our other cut, and this is why we marked one side than the other, because now I can just flip it over and cut the other side and I don't have to readjust the fence. Not that I would have enough throat depth anyway to cut both sides that way. So this is why I've marked one side, flipped it over, marked the other side, and that's all to run it through the bandsaw this way. So here I'm going through, same thing, cutting it all the way down to that line, and then once we get to that line, we're done, and we're going to move on to the next board. So let's rinse and repeat with the other boards. Okay, now that our inner lines are all cut, we're going to go ahead and reset our fence so we can basically cut that inner line. Same thing, I'm just going to loosen the fence up. I'm going to take one of my boards, I'm going to line it up over here, get that center fence lined up exactly where I need it, nudge it over as needed, and let's go ahead and cut all the other boards to their inner lines. Okay, with all our lines cut, we need to remove that waste piece. And I found the easiest way to do this was for me to take one of my, basically a 3/4 inch chisel, and with a mallet, I'm just going to give it a couple taps, and I want to sever the fibers on that top layer of the plywood. This leaves a nice clean mark here. I'm just kind of measuring things up to see where things are at, make sure I'm nice and clean on the lines. And I'm just going to give it a couple whacks. And I'm really just looking to just basically score that top layer. Go ahead and do it on this side as well. Get it between the lines, score it with the mallet, and then once we have that scored, we're going to go through and use a pair of vice grips or a pair of channel locks, and we're just going to snap that piece out. This leaves it pretty clean, and you just need to clean up the edges with a chisel as needed. So let's do that. Okay, so next we need to mark our side panels and put our layout lines in. These layout lines are for us to cut out that center portion that the filter is going to sit over and let the air flow in. So this is pretty easy. All these measurements are basically 1 inch from the edge, and here I'm using a little Incra measuring tool to basically come in 1 inch from that side edge.
and I'm just basically lining it up and going through and marking this 1 inch from the edge. Here I'm squinting because the light in the shop's not good, and the little marks on this ink are not easy to see. So here I've got it marked, and there we go. Now I'm going to repeat for the other panels. Okay, next I'm going to take our 1 inch wide ruler, and I'm going to mark 1 inch in from the edge in those corners. And what I want to do is leave a cross hatch for my Forstner bit to sit into, so I know exactly where I'm going to basically put that Forstner bit to get a 1 inch radius corner. So to get a 1 inch radius corner, I need to use a 2 inch Forstner bit. So these marks are 1 inch in from those inner lines there. With our layout lines in place for the Forstner bit, I've gone ahead and moved over to the drill press. I've got a 2 inch Forstner bit loaded, and here I'm going to go through and line it up and drill those holes. Dust collection, no matter I use the big dust collector with a 4 inch or I use my shop vac one, these Forstner bits, the big ones, throw off significant large chips, and basically at this point the dust collection is just getting a lot of the fine stuff. The big chips are going to fly where they fly. But I'm going to go ahead and repeat this, drill all 4 corners of each board, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cut out the sides. So here I've just got my jigsaw, and I probably should have got a better blade for this because this blade kind of leaves a lot of tear out, but we're going to sand it, and this is going to be on the inside anyway, so it's not going to make much difference. But I'm just going to follow my layout lines and cut between the holes as close as I can. And like I said, the filter's going to cover all this up anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And the reason I did these big round holes is that since we're cutting so much out of this panel, a point of cracking could be where those sharp corners meet. And a round corner is a lot stronger than 2 points meeting as far as the ability to crack. So this adds a little bit of strength to that. So we're going to go ahead and walk around, cut out all the inners. Next, I'm just going to go through and give all these panels a thorough sanding. This takes some of that tear out off the edges just so it doesn't snag or get a splinter. Just to kind of smooth everything out. This also helps remove some of my layout lines so they're not visible. And I'm just going to go through and clean everything up real fast. Here I've moved on to rounding over the corners on the top and bottom panels. I'm using a corner routing template. This is a 1 1/4 inch template. You can obviously sand these corners or do whatever you want to do, or just use a jigsaw and nip them off and then round them over. But I bought these inexpensive plastic templates off of Marketplace. I think it was $15 for a whole set of these things, and someone basically made these on a 3D printer, and they work pretty well. And here I've just got a flush trim bit in here, and I'm just going around the pattern, and I'm basically nipping those corners off. Okay, and with all the parts cut, let's go ahead and test assemble it and see how everything fits. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. At this point, the box should look pretty much exactly like the box on the plans. Next, let's go ahead and get the fan mounted and talk about mounting the filters and all the other just little small stuff that we need to do to finish it up. Here I moved back over to the workshop, and I'm just going to go ahead and get the shroud kind of loosely in place, and I'm going to put some blocking underneath it to raise it up so I'm not smushing that shroud. Next thing I'm going to do is finish disassembling the fan, which is removing the stand and basically taking the controller off the actual stand here. One of the things I need to do is basically check to see where the wiring is going to come through for that controller. So I'm going to go ahead and get the fan kind of loosely put back together, and then I can kind of check it to make sure everything's working. And then what I'm going to do is basically put the sides back on so I know where my spacing is and where I can put this controller and it not interfere with the sides. So it's probably going to go here in the corner. So what I'm doing is just kind of lining it up and figuring out where I want it. And then I'm loosely going to mark where the wiring is going to go through and marking that with a pencil. Sorry you can't see that. The bad camera angle here. So now that I've got those wiring holes marked, I'm kind of going through and just kind of extending those lines down a bit. And I'm kind of going to draw out a little, basically cut out a little niche for that wiring to kind of slip through. So it's going to slip through from the center hole inward a little bit there. And then I'm going to come back and take a jigsaw and just kind of cut out that space. So I've kind of created just kind of like a little T-shape here so the wiring can slip through a narrow spot and then extend in. Next I'm going to go ahead and remount the fan. And I'm going to go ahead and slip that wiring through those holes I drilled just to kind of check it to make sure everything's kind of going to line up exactly where I want it. Next I've cut some little 1" by 2" blocks out of 3/4 inch pine. Here the grain is running the long direction. These little blocks are going to use to basically create hold downs to keep the fan in place. Okay, so now we're at the bandsaw. What I'm going to do is just basically cut a little, like, 1/4 inch by, by 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch notch out of the corner. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be too exact. Something like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut the other 4. And then here I'm just going to go ahead and countersink a screw into each of these blocks, kind of away from that notch I drilled, and this is just going to use as a mounting point for a screw. After all of those are drilled, we're going to go ahead and mount these little blocks, and that will basically secure the lip of the fan down to the base plate. I'm drilling one here where kind of close to where that wire connects, and then I'm going to put another one on the other side, and then I'm going to space the other 3 out around the perimeter of the fan. With the fan secure, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over, and I want to see how that control pack is looking and kind of where it sits and how I need to secure it. So what I've done is quickly just kind of made some marks so I kind of know how to orient it, and then I'm going to need to flip the fan over, and I'm going to need to basically pull the fan back out. There's a raised area on the back of the control pack, and because of where the wiring connects, and because of that, the control pack won't sit level on the faceplate of this board. So what I'm going to do is just router just a little bit of a relief to give that pack somewhere to sit so it's nice and level. Okay, so what I'm doing here is kind of test fitting that control pack to make sure that relief I cut out fits. And now what I'm doing is I'm tracing around the control pack to give me kind of an outside measurement. And then I'm going through and measuring where that mounting bolt is on the control pack. And then I can go ahead and drill the 5/16 hole in the board. And with that, we can go ahead and test fit everything one more time and then hopefully put the fan back together for the last time. To secure the control pack, we're going to use the original knob that came with it, and we're going to use the washer that we took off of the legs when we took it apart. Okay, with our fan secure, we're going to go ahead and flip the fan back over. And what I want to do is basically make some marks on the face here so I know where to drill the holes to secure basically the side frames. So what I'm going to do is flip this over, and I'm going to come in with our ruler, 1" ruler, and I'm going to mark 1" out from the sides. And then I'm going to basically use a piece of scrap and mark in roughly 3/4 of the way in, and that tells me where I need to basically put my holes right between those 2 lines. So using a countersink bit, I'm going to come in and drill 2 holes about 1.5 to 2 inches away from our lines here. And that's really because I want all the support to be in the corners, because that's where the side frames are the thickest. After we get it assembled, we'll drill some more holes down the perimeter, but for here, this will allow us to basically use longer screws. With the holes done, we're going to go ahead and flip this over and re-support it, and then we can go ahead and basically bring our side pieces back in. Okay, what I'm trying to do now is line up the sides and get them exactly as close as I can all the way around, because I really want to be able to get this perfect so they kind of line up on the outside edges as close as I can, nice and square, because I'm going to use these to basically make some marks, and those are going to be my alignment points when I go to screw these things together and to line up the individual sides. It'll make sense more as you see as I move through here. So with a pencil, I'm kind of going around and basically tracing the outside corners and the inside corners, and just basically giving me that alignment point that I'm looking for here that I'm going to use in a moment. So this is just pretty quick, going around, tracing everything out. With those alignment marks made, I can go ahead and pull the sides back apart. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and put the glue down the bottom of the first side. The first side to use is going to be the side where the slots face up. Sorry, my camera angle wasn't great here, but I think you get the idea. I'm just basically applying glue all along that bottom edge. And using my alignment points, I'm going to go ahead and line that up between the two marks that I've made. Get it as close as I can. Everything's going to square up here in a minute, so really you're just kind of holding it in place and kind of letting that glue stick for a minute, because when I put the next piece in place, everything will line up here. A couple clamps help to kind of hold it all in place temporarily. And we're going to go ahead and repeat the process with a piece across from it, because those are the two pieces that need to go in first. Okay, next we're going to take the glue and we're going to apply glue to this slot right here. So we want to get glue on the bottom edge of that slot and all the way up both sides. So make sure you can be a little generous with the glue. We can always wipe out any squeeze out. It won't cause any problems. But make sure you got a good coat, because you want to coat those surfaces very, very well. And we're all done. We're going to go ahead and repeat with the other side. Next, we're going to go ahead and put glue on the piece that interlocks with these other two pieces. So what we want to do is we want to put glue all along this top surface right here. So here I'm applying glue all along it. Once again, be generous. It's not going to, better to have more than less on these pieces. And once we get it all spread out, then we're going to go ahead and put the same amount of glue like we did before down in the slots, because we want good glue bond between all these surfaces. So go ahead and glue it up, and then we're going to go ahead and put it in place. And once we get it in place, go ahead and apply some clamps to hold everything together. And next we're going to go ahead and repeat the exact same process with the other side. With the bottom all glued, I flipped it over, and here I'm actually taking a 1/8 inch drill bit, and I'm drilling down through the holes I've already made into the plywood, because I don't want that plywood to split when I drive the 2-inch screws into them. With the holes all drilled, I'm going to take these 2-inch spack screws and go ahead and screw them in. You really don't want to torque these down all the way. We don't want to strip these out. We don't want to split any of the wood. You're just trying to get them snug, and that's all you need them to be. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going through and pulling some of the clamps off, and I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to extend those lines down that I made for those corner screws, so I can actually mark the screws to actually go down the side. And I'm just going to put one clamp back in the middle, just to basically... And then taking my 1/8 inch drill bit again, I'm going to go through and basically put, 4 more screw holes down the side. These are going to be shorter screws we're going to use here. They're only going to be 1 inch and a quarter, because we don't have a lot of depth on the side pieces. So you can either do, in this case, I'm just using the 1/8 bit first. It doesn't matter the order. So here I've flipped it back over, and what we need to do is drill a hole basically through this corner. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to drill this hole through this corner to give us a place for the plug to exit. Now, if we drill a hole through the top, that's going to leave a pretty big hole. So this is probably the easiest way to give us the smallest hole possible to kind of let that wire egress out of there. So what I've done is take a piece of scrap, and I'm just going to clamp it here in the corner, and I'm going to use that as a drilling guide so I can drill a nice level square hole right through that corner. So I'm taking my drill with a 5/16 inch drill bit, and I'm going to go ahead and clamp that all together. I'm just kind of making sure everything is clamped really good. I'm using a bar clamp to kind of squeeze those sides together, because I don't want that drill bit to push those pieces apart, since that top edge isn't screwed in place yet and the glue isn't completely dry. But I want to go ahead and get this drilled in, because as soon as I drill that, or basically as soon as I attach that top, I won't be able to do this. So here I'm actually taking that 5/16 inch drill bit and drilling straight through the corner to the inside, level with the top. And as soon as I pull this scrap piece off, it'll make sense. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily put the top on, and then like we did before on the bottom, I'm going to go through and mark 1 inch away from the edge on all the corners and mark in 3/4 of an inch. And basically, so I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. I'm going to go ahead and pull the lid off, and then I'm going to apply a bead of glue all the way around those side frames. And then we're going to go ahead and glue it on. With the glue in place and the lid back on, we're just simply going to go around just like we did before and screw the corners with 2-inch screws. And then we'll go ahead and pre-drill out the other sets of screws and use 1 1/4 inch screws. Here I've flipped the assembly back over. And one thing I've noticed is this outside edge right here isn't supported very well. It's kind of the piece that is up against a slot. And so what I need to do is put a clamp on it and put 1 more screw in place. And that's just to support that little piece that's kind of hanging loose. Now eventually the glue would dry, but it kind of bows out. So I want to go ahead and re-secure it. So we're just going to basically pre-drill and countersink 1 more screw into each of those 4 corners, just to give that a little bit of extra support. So we're going to do that on the top and on the bottom. Okay, and with the assembly all screwed together, I'm just going to check that everything still works, and you know, I didn't pinch the wire or screw anything up, but yeah, it looks like we're still good. Blowing air, everything looks like it's working. On to the next little bit of housekeeping, and we're done. So one of the things we need to do is seal all the joints, just kind of make it a little more airtight. So what I'm just using is a tube of DAP caulking. This is for sealing like windows and trim work. It's a leftover tube I already had because we just changed out a lot of trim work in the house. So here I'm just applying a bead, and I'm going around all the outer perimeter where the filter is going to sit. I'm going to do the outer perimeter, and then I'm going to do all of the joints inside the box. Because the filter is going to cover this up, you won't see this caulking. I'm not going to do the very corners on the outside because those are visible, and because they're going to be sealed on the inside anyway, so it's not needed. That way you won't have a caulk line that's visible. Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and let this caulking dry overnight. Okay, next morning, we're going to move on to mounting the filter elements. These filter elements are 12 by 24, and that's what we made our opening, but filters tend to not come exactly their rated sizes. They're a little undersized. That's not a big worry. Since we have that 1-inch lip all the way around, we've got plenty of surface area. One of the things we need to figure out is how we're going to retain these filters in the frame. And what I've come up with is using this 3/4 inch piping strap. And you can find this in most of the plumbing departments in any big box store. And what I'm going to do is basically use a pair of tin snips. And with these tin snips, I'm going to come through and cut these things to about, I don't know, 2.5 inches long. Just enough so I kind of get 4 holes. That's kind of what my mark here. 2 small holes, 2 large holes. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut it between the holes and just get kind of 4 pieces that are roughly about the same size. You kind of have to fiddle with these. Sometimes the tin snips don't want to cut cleanly, but I'm just trying to get through and cut them as evenly as possible and go ahead and get 4 pieces for each side. So you're going to need 16 of these total. And with all the pieces of strapping cut, I'm going to take some small 1/2-inch screws and I'm going to go ahead and attach them. So what we want to do is take the piece of strapping and we're going to push it all the way to the back, and then we're going to go ahead and put a screw in basically the front hole that's on the board here, and we're just going to screw it in place. You want to come in from the side at around 3 inches. The placement's not exactly perfect, it doesn't matter, but we just want to support it along this long edge. So we want to come in from the corner a little bit. So let's go ahead and repeat this with the other 3. So I'm going to go ahead and install the filter. It's important that the filter go in the right orientation. The arrow is going to show you which way the airflow is, so we want the arrows to face in. So basically hold the filter in place, and you're just going to basically bend these down. That's going to hold the filter plenty secure. It's pressing it against that wood backer, the 1-inch wood surround, and it's going to hold it in place. Now there's a gap around the edges, but the back is pressed firmly against that. If you want to, you can shove weather stripping in here. I don't think it's really necessary, but you can. The problem is, don't be careful with the weather stripping. If you put too much in here and then you buy different filters, those filters may actually have a different size and you may run into problems. But I don't think you need the weather stripping, but you can if you wish. With all the filters in place, I'm just going to give it a little bench test here and see how it works. So we'll let the fan spin up here, and we'll test it with see what kind of airflow we're getting here. And here I'm using just basically a paper towel, and just to make sure it sticks. Next, I'm going to go through and basically drill out the mounting holes for the hanging hardware. So here I'm going through and drilling the holes. Depending on what kind of hardware you get, I'm drilling holes for 5/16 inch hardware. So I'm going to drill the 4 holes out, and then we'll move on. So let's talk about the mounting hardware we're using. We've got some 5/16 screw type eye bolts, and those are for the ceiling joists. We have some 5/16 threaded eye bolts, which are going to screw into the fan cabinet. We've got some turnbuckles, which are going to link the two, and then I've got some of these quick links to make it easier to put it on the ceiling and take it off the ceiling. So I need to open these eye hooks up a little bit. These eye hooks are kind of a closed loop, and I need to basically open them up so I can get the turnbuckle loops in there. I don't want anything to be a hook that can just get bumped and fall off the ceiling, so I want to keep these all closed. So what I've actually done is just take a pry bar, I've opened up that hook by kind of clamping this into a vise, and then I'm just kind of taking a hammer and I'm kind of closing the loop back up. Very simple. Okay, with the turnbuckles attached, we're going to go ahead and put the bottom hooks into the cabinet. And what I'm just using is some washers, and I just had washers laying around, but you're just going to use some 5/16 washers that are large enough. And what we're doing is we're putting washer on the top, and that just keeps the hook from being tightened into and piercing the plywood. So it's just giving you a bigger surface area. And we're going to go around and basically just put all 4 hooks in. And from the bottom side, we're just going to go ahead and use another washer, and we're going to use a lock washer, and then we're just going to basically put the nut on. And this should keep the any vibration from working those nuts off, and kind of sandwich that plywood between those two big washers. So let's go ahead and do that. With all the hardware mounted, I can go ahead and put the filter back on now. One of the things we need to do before we put it on the ceiling is to basically put these quick links on. That's what I've done here, is I've basically opened these quick links up all the way, and we're just going to stick them over the turnbuckles with the threaded knob towards the bottom. That way this can be real easy to loop over the hooks we've already installed in the ceiling. I've already installed the threaded hooks into the ceiling joists, and obviously you're going to have to do this based upon where your ceiling joists are located, and check to make sure that your ceiling joists can support the load. This thing weighs about 25 pounds. It's not that heavy, it's just a little awkward. I really should have had a helper help me with this, but I didn't have anyone available at the time, and I wanted to kind of get this installed. Luckily, I'm kind of balancing it here on a ladder, and then I'm going to basically balance it on that shelf up there until I can get basically one side, get those quick links over the hooks in the ceiling. And then I can just swing it up into place. Okay, finally what I'm going to do is basically just take a level and a crescent wrench, and I'm going to go around and using the level, make sure this thing is level on all 4 sides. And if it's not, I'm going to use the crescent wrench to adjust the turnbuckles to get it level.
And with that, we're done. What I've done is I've just simply tied it into the power. Right now, just a simple small extension cord that runs from there to runs that air filter. And what I've done is I've plugged that air filter into a smart switch so I can control it. So I've got an Alexa in the garage, so I can do things like, Alexa, turn off the workshop. And it turns off the lights over here in this area. Alexa, turn on the workshop. Which turns it on, which is handy. And I have her play music and things of that nature. But now I could say, Alexa, clean the air. And she turns the air filter on. I've got a routine set up on this where when I tell her to do that, she will run this air filter for 2 hours. And that should be plenty of time to pretty much get all that dust out of the air. If I need to, I can tell her to just turn it on and let it run as long as I want it to run. I can also tell her to turn it off. Alexa, turn off the air filter. And she turns it off. If I need to override the controls, I can still reach all the controls here. It's just tall enough for me to reach, and I can turn the speed up and down. Obviously, if I'm cleaning the air and I want to get the air scrubbed, I'm going to leave it on high. But if I'm doing something where I kind of want to circulate the air, maybe scrub a little bit of stuff out of the air while I'm working, but maybe I'm doing finishing or something and I don't want it stirring up anything in the air too, then maybe I'll just put it on low just to kind of circulate the air. So it gives me some options. And with that, I think we're done. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, give me a like. If you want to see more content, hit subscribe or hit the bell. And I appreciate any comments, questions, anything you got. Like I said, I'll try to update everything in the plans that I figured out along the way. I've made some changes as I was building this versus the original design, so I'll update that along the way. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I appreciate any comments. Get out of the garage and do something. Bye.